I'm Ed Kelly, editor of the Oklahoman. Confirmation hearings have begun in Washington for Sonia Sotomayor to be the next justice of the United States Supreme Court. To talk about the hearings so far and where they might be headed are our D.C. All-Stars, Chris Castile, chief of the Oklahoman's Washington Bureau, and Mark Green, national editorial writer for the Oklahoman. Gentlemen, any surprises so far as the hearings get underway, or should we expect any surprises at all from this nominee and the people who are questioning her?
Well, I don't think there's been any cataclysmic type surprises so far. I think that the judge has been I think very likable and she's made sense. She hasn't talked in a language I think that's above the heads of all Americans. I think she's talked in common language pretty well. She has been calm, she's been composed, and I heard one of the Republican senators say during one of the breaks that she's very likable. So in that sense, I think she's doing pretty well. The one thing that I would say was somewhat surprising was the way that in the questioning by the first Republican Senator, Jeff Sessions of Alabama, he seemed to have her on her heels a couple times trying to explain the wise Latina quote, which is one of the main focuses of the Republican questioning today. She at first talked about it being kind of out of context, and then after Sessions came at her a couple of times, she finally just said that it was a rhetorical flourish that she employed that didn't work, and kind of walked away from it in that way. So that was a little bit surprising, since she's had a long time to prepare for a question that was going to be pretty obviously asked.
Right.
Right, and I think in terms of surprise as far as her opinions on legal issues, you're not going to see any. A lot of times the questions about issues, whether Second Amendment, affirmative action, eminent domain, whatever they may be, quickly kind of become real technical in terms of how a court's ruled and precedents and everything. Today on the Second Amendment case, it quickly devolved into a discussion. The question now being whether the case last year involving handgun ownership in D.C. applies automatically to the states. Quickly, the questioning got very technical about footnotes and in the Supreme Court decision last year and how it applied to a 1939 decision and et cetera, et cetera. So quickly, your eyes kind of glaze over on that. And I think the biggest opportunity for surprises was on the questions about remarks she's made outside the courtroom. And I think it'll also be a surprise if they're able to ever link any of those comments that she made about the wise Latina woman and being able to judge better than a white man. If they were able to link it to cases, she very flatly denied today that she had ever done that. She basically challenged them to look at what she's done on the appellate court, and they haven't so far linked any cases to those kinds of statements that have been controversial.
Yeah, and I would just say that I don't think that I agree with Chris. The bottom line is I don't think that even her maybe kind of fumbling around to explain that comment outside the courtroom is going to have any bearing on whether she's confirmed or not. I mean, I think what ends up happening is senators like Jeff Sessions and the other Republicans on the panel are satisfying their base in asking pointed questions about underlying concerns that they have that you may not be able to see in a court decision, but get at a judge's philosophy.
Mark, you mentioned it, and closer to home, Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, of course, is part of this process, a member of the Judiciary Committee, and he met with Judge Sotomayor before these hearings began. What will be his likely strategy during his questioning during these hearings, and is there any way that he ends up voting for her confirmation?
Ed, I don't see him ever voting for her confirmation. I think that he's already kind of said to me when I interviewed him about it last week that he just disagrees with how she's ruled in various cases, including affirmative action, the case, the New Haven case on the firefighters, and he doesn't agree with how she ruled post the D.C. gun rights case and a Second Amendment case that came before the Second Circuit after that case. So I think it would be kind of, plus he's convinced that she would also be a very strong pro-choice vote on the court. But he's the last Republican, the seventh Republican that'll be able to answer quite a lot of questions will have been asked by then. He did meet with her privately before these hearings started a few weeks ago, and wasn't willing to divulge the the discussions. He did mention yesterday in his opening statement that he had told her when they met privately that he believes that there's kind of a fissure in American society now, kind of based not on politics but on the idea that the law is not impartial. So it could be that he just goes at it with broad philosophical questions. I don't think he'll try to get real. He's not a lawyer. I don't think he'll try to argue the finer points of case law. So he may go after on this whole question of, will you look at foreign law in deciding cases? He may ask her about abortion, Second Amendment issues.
I think you're going to see all the Republicans follow Sessions' lead to some extent. As Chris said, by the time Coburn starts questioning, this will be thoroughly mined. But
right.
They're all going to talk about the Latina comment, her Second Amendment stance, the Ricci case, the affirmative action case from New Haven, Connecticut. I think the Republican to watch on the panel is Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina senator,
right.
who yesterday seemed to suggest that elections have consequences and presidents are to be deferred to in the sense they get the chance to pick people for the Supreme Court, and he's going to give him a pretty wide berth, Obama a pretty wide berth there. It'll be interesting to see how he finally comes down when it comes to voting.
Okay, Mark, Chris, thanks so much. Job well done.
Thank you, Ed.
Stay on News OK for more coverage of these confirmation hearings.